Hello, welcome back to another rambling video. Today we're going to be talking about asset flipping, but more so about the actual practical applications of using marketplace assets. Now, the reason that I'm making this video is because I was watching an Asmongold clip. I repent. I was looking at like some, you know, the next big MMO. He was reacting to a content creator. The game was like 100% assets, and they were using the demo level from, you know, like a props pack, and they were using that level in the trailer for this, you know, MMO, blah, blah, blah. And so like there's this huge rabbit hole. And I think there is sort of a lot of taboo around assets, especially within the game dev community and also within the gaming community. So I just thought I'd share my opinions and just share some advice. If you ask, you know, any old game dev, any old, you know, gatekeeping indie game dev, they'll say that, you know, using assets is a sin. And that, you know, you're not a real game developer if you use marketplace assets. Basically, they're just full of shit. What's my opinion? Well, I love marketplace assets. I'm like one of those fiends that, like, you know, around the first week of every month, I'm just like refreshing the marketplace, Unreal Marketplace, for the new free assets for the month. You know, I'm suckling on the teat of Epic Games to get me those sweet, sweet free assets. But to me, there are sort of multiple considerations with assets and stuff. Some of my stances on assets come from like a, you know, stylistic and, you know, ethical point of view. And other opinions that I have are like more to do with like the practicality of using assets in like a long-term development situation. So let's talk about the stylistic side. Let's say you are developing a photorealistic, you know, hyper-realistic game that's set in the real world, and you need to make a crate that you can break open and there's like loot and stuff inside, and you need some barrels and you need some chests. Now, you could open up Blender, you could spend maybe like 20 hours putting together, you know, a bunch of things that are just made of wood and like little bits of metal, and they're all, you know, super duper generic. They're just like copies from the real world and that kind of stuff. They're like, you know, things that are just going to be in the background of the scene. They're not like hero assets or whatever. So you could spend 20 hours realistically doing that, probably even longer. And so let's just say that you're working minimum wage, which is 25 bucks. 20 times 25. $500. So you've just wasted $500 making some photorealistic, you know, wooden props for your project. Time well spent. Or you could have just gone to the marketplace, looked for a $20, you know, various wooden furniture pack that is, you know, completely photorealistic. They're all optimized. They've all got LODs. You know, they've got great textures. They've got, you know, materials that are set up so you can like change the tint and the stain of the wood and all that kind of stuff. And buying that and using that is 1 hour's worth of your time as opposed to that 20. So I think in the case of generic props and generic environment assets are like a no-brainer. So, you know, even things like foliage, you know, like a fern is a fern. Like if you commissioned someone, hey, I need like 10 variations of like ferns for the forest floor, you know, they could send you those ferns. Maybe that'd cost you, you know, yeah, $500, $1,000 for, you know, just hours alone. And, you know, if you'd got someone else to do it for that same price, they would essentially return the exact same thing. You know, there's only like so many ways that you can make a piece of, you know, real world plant foliage, or, you know, crates and barrels and tables and all that kind of stuff. So I think in that case, assets are recommended, not just appropriate or, you know, it's fine. It's like, just get assets for that boring stuff. Don't bother making it yourself. Now, even if you are doing a, you know, more stylized, stylistic type of project, assets can still be a really good starting point for, you know, saving. Maybe you can like cut your time in half by using assets as, you know, building blocks to make your own stuff. So for example, we're going to open up my project, and you can see, aside from this this decal that was in my last thumbnail, you can see I've got some assets just sprinkled around here, right? And, you know, you might be thinking, oh yeah, this, you know, looks pretty unique. Are these assets? And the answer is yes. Literally everything in my project except for characters, for reasons that we will get into later on in the video, are assets. However, they have been altered, and we'll actually go over how I've altered them in a minute. Let me just go to my asset zoo. Now that we've loaded this level, you can see that I've got a just a few assets that I've harvested is how I call it. So you can see here, you know, here's one little asset pack right here. I've gone and harvested these assets from the pack, and they look very Prismatica-esque. You know, more assets here, another little sub pack. Everything looks, you know, like it fits right in with one another. And, you know, if we pull these barrels from over here and we chuck them over with this asset pack over here, you know, if I just match the colors of these a bit better, you can see that these are, you know, very indistinguishable from one another. They look like they are from the same game. Again, we can look through all of these, another asset pack, another different asset pack, you know, same style, blah, blah. We've got these trees. The trees fit right in. We've got all these building pieces. They all fit right in. You know, we've got a bunch of foliage and plants and flowers and all this stuff, and it all fits right in. So essentially what I do for assets is I get the asset as is, and aside from like doing an optimization pass in Blender by, you know, combining material slots and all that sort of stuff, all I really do is just remove the color texture. So if we look at it in unlit mode, you can see that this is just one color, right? There's no change in color across, you know, this mesh. There's no, like, you know, little bits of detail where the wood has chipped away, or no like mold or moss or anything. Just one big solid color. And then the normal map is exactly the same as it is in the asset. And then when that is combined with my post-processing, you know, my cell shader and whatnot, we get something that looks relatively unique, you know, relatively in style with every other asset in the project. You know, even these assets here, like I've seen this exact pack being used in Dark and Darker. I've seen this used in Lies of P, which is a very highly regarded Souls-like game that I very much enjoyed. So there are heaps and heaps of ways that you can repurpose assets, you know, very easily. Like, as an example, let's just make a new material real quick, and we're just going to whack it onto here. Let's say you've got a photorealistic, you know, castle wall pack. Let's stylize this asset. Let's flip this asset. So let's do like Valheim as an example. Valheim, while they probably did make all of their assets and stuff, their style revolves around having this sort of realistic texture, but then it gets pixelated. And that includes like the normals as well and all of the other auxiliary channels. So let's get our text coordinates. We will, I don't know, multiply it by 128. Then we're going to round the coordinates to the nearest integer. I'm going to divide them by 128, probably. And then we'll chuck that into the UV coordinates. And you can see already, we've just pixelated our thing. And bam! It's every indie horror game that's been released in the past 5 years, you know? All we need is some fucking PS1 vertex snapping and we're good to go. So you can see, you know, even the normal maps are pixelated. That's one idea. Another thing you could do is just get the textures that came with the assets and just export them. And then you could open up a perfectly legitimate copy of Photoshop from 2015, and we could just grab our textures and yeet them into here. And let's just chuck it through, I don't know, a cutout filter. Cutout is always a classic. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with the actual color texture. Right, now I've brought these two textures back in. We're just going to go back into this one. We're going to get rid of our pixelation doodad. And now we're just going to get the wall color. Right, now we've applied those textures and look at that. We've got this, you know, stylized, almost painterly, ooh, love painterly, styled wall texture. All from an asset. And that applies to both the normals and the actual, you know, colors of the thingamajig. And so the reason that you want to be doing stuff like this isn't just so that, you know, you can cover up the fact that you used marketplace assets in your project, but it's more to be able to bring them all in line with one another. So, you know, if you buy assets from this pack and from that pack, and there's some, like, you know, slight, maybe one of them uses, you know, 4K textures and the other one uses 2K textures, and one of them's, you know, a bit more high poly than the other one, and when you put, you know, some tableware from this asset pack on top of this asset pack's table, then you see like a kind of difference in quality. By stylizing them, by, you know, using some sort of pipeline, then they both tend to at least look like they belong together. So that's sort of one of the main things about using assets. We've just solved it. There are sort of two other marketplace doodads that, you know, people always ask about, you know, should I get this? Should I get that? Should I blah, 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 blah. One of them is characters. And my usual advice for characters is just don't. Like, just don't. Now, the reason for that isn't from, you know, an ethical standpoint and whatever. It's just that for the long-term productivity of your project, you're gonna wanna do. Hello, I'm having a stroke. You're gonna wanna have a character pipeline that is uniform for your entire project. So you probably want to have your own skeleton, or you probably want to be using, you know, the Unreal skeleton or whatever. Whenever you're doing a new thing of clothing, they'll be, you know, weighted to that character model, and maybe you can, you know, just use that character model, but just shift the bones around to, you know, give them broader shoulders so they look like that big, you know, like tough, like triangular looking Clash of Clans motherfucker. If you need to do facial animations, they're all using the same topology, so you can just use the same morph targets and all that kind of stuff. When you start to mix and match different characters, especially if you want modularity, you know, you want to be able to equip armor to a character, this armor with these gloves, with this helmet, all that kind of stuff, then having your own character pipeline as soon as possible is going to, you know, benefit you over the long run. Unless it's something like just generic wildlife that's in the background, you know, like birds and rabbits and deer and all that kind of stuff, and you're using a photorealistic style, then that kind of makes sense because, you know, you're saving time, and, you know, there's only one ideal way to model a deer and to animate a deer. But for things like humanoid characters, even if they're not supposed to be modular and you've just got like a crowd of characters that are just background NPCs and whatever, you'll find that when you start to, you know, pull from different asset packs and they've all got their own animations and stuff, it can just become a real nightmare. The Unreal Marketplace is usually better because everything is rigged to the Unreal Engine skeleton. So a lot of the animations, while you're not going to get errors that are going to brick the game while using them, you know, switching them between characters and stuff, there can still be some like real jankiness. So if you're using like the default Unreal mannequin animations, you know, the idle animation and the falling animation loop, and you're using that with like a feminine character that has like, you know, realistic shoulders, then everything can kind of get fucked up. So just be aware of that. And then the third thing about the marketplace, the third asset type of the marketplace is code plugins. Now, code plugins come in two flavors, right? You've got this is a code plugin that is doing something really niche and extending the functionality of the engine in a way that would take, you know, months of work for me to do myself, and this person has done it, wrapped it all in a nice little package and made it really easy to use. And it's essentially just like, you know, any other feature that you'd find in the engine. For example, Fluid Ninja. For example, Runtime Vertex Paint and Detection plugin. For example, Smooth Sync. Little function libraries like a library that can take a bunch of vectors and choose the shortest one from an array. If there's something on the marketplace that offers that functionality for something that you would have to dig through the engine and edit files and shit for, just go for it. Absolutely, 100%. The only downside is if they ever become unsupported, or they break, or if the plugin creator goes missing or something, then you can be a bit screwed. When you update your engine, you'll get errors and stuff. It's a bit of a nightmare, but then the second flavor of code plugin on the marketplace is the pre-made entire system asset pack thing, you know, like starter RPG inventory system modular extreme, or like combat ultimate RPG MMO replicated thing with animations, you know, like that kind of shit, where it's like, here's an entire section of a video game and we're going to give you this plugin, so like all you have to do is like put this thing on the thing and it does the stuff. And like, it always seems like it's going to be a big time saver, but it's like, it's just not most of the time. I think a lot of people kind of get sucked in to those kind of systems thinking that they're just going to be able to make, you know, an MMO because they got this MMO combat plugin. It's basically the make game button, right? Which isn't really the case, and you'll find that out as soon as you start to try and integrate these systems with one another. You know, maybe you've got your RPG combat Skyrim clone plugin, and you've got your Escape from Tarkov modular inventory drag and drop blah blah, and you've got your Diablo style stat, and because you're not the one that created those plugins and those systems, you're gonna have to learn those systems pretty deeply in order to interconnect them all with one another, and that will take a lot of time, and you're also not going to gain anything valuable from doing that. You know, if you wanted to implement something unique in a follow-up, you know, project or a project with some other people or whatever, then you haven't learned anything about, you know, a combat system, an inventory system, you know, attributes and modifying attributes and all that kind of stuff. You've really just learned how to use these particular templated systems. That being said, I do think that using systems like that as a learning tool, buying them, downloading them, implementing them, following their little documentation and learning, you know, how it all kind of links together can be very valuable. But if you're actually trying to ship a game that is doing anything outside the scope of those plugins, you're just not going to have fun. It's not going to be fun. You're going to be fighting against the plugin, and you're just going to have a bad time. So that's sort of my take on plugin assets. And so, you know, there's lots of examples of games that have sort of just relied on marketplace assets, maybe a little bit too heavily. You know, you got like The Day Before, which seemed to be built around a bunch of marketplace, you know, not just visual assets, but like code assets as well. You know, you got the classic Only Up, which was just, I mean, I thought Only Up obviously took a lot of effort to put together, but it received a lot of criticism from gamers. It's sort of very easy to tell that everything was just from the marketplace, maybe even just accrued over multiple years of the free asset giveaways. That's what I like to think, that it was a zero budget game. And so while I do think there's nothing wrong with using assets, and you shouldn't need to like hide the fact that you're using marketplace, like, you know, AAA games use asset packs and like sound effects library. A lot of the Dark Souls sound effects are just from a generic, you know, audio library. And even like some assets in Elden Ring are just from, you know, like a visual asset library and whatnot. So like AAA games are full of assets, especially like photorealistic games. They're all using Quixel Megascans. If you want a rocky cliff, you know, why would you not just get one from Quixel Megascans? It's like literally photo scanned, and it's super high resolution, and there are only, you know, so many ways that you can model a cliffside and like smash a bunch of them together and whatnot. So like just use Quixel Megascans. So that is my opinion on marketplace assets. That's my advice. Use generic assets whenever you can, wherever you can. Change the style of the assets. I didn't really touch on optimizing assets because it usually, if you are restyling assets, you're going to be optimizing them anyway, material slots and whatever. Characters are very niche. There are some uses for character assets, but they are very few and far between in, you know, most projects. And then lastly, code assets. Niche engine functionality extensions, yes. Gameplay template / entire mechanics of a game, while there isn't anything wrong with them, you are going to run into issues in the long run. And you're also not going to learn anything valuable. You know, life is about learning. So if you made it here to the end, then thank you very much. And a special thank you to the patrons who keep this channel doing the thing. I hope you learned something, and with that, we say goodbye. Goodbye.